Jesse, Olga, hey, congratulations on this new film, Boudica, the Queen of War.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
I always love these type of period movies, and tons of action and so on. So, Jesse, let me throw the first question to you: is where the original idea came from, and how are you going to make this movie different from all the other Boudica movies that came before?
That's the $64,000 question, Gig. They've made a lot of them, documentaries, films. She's been a character in a lot of big movies, and I felt they were all lacking and hadn't paid her the respect that was necessary, firstly, but also hadn't handled this mid-act crises. It's an unfilmable event. It's not something, defies imagination what happened to her. There's no way you could even scratch at the surface of the horrific nature of something like that. It would end up being worse than the Serbian film. It's just not, it's not something you do. But beyond that, there was an incredible legend and a mythology, this transformation from queen and mother to warrior, that fascinated me, and there was something special about it. And I've harbored the desire to make this project for a long, long time. It was a story that my mother, who was a single parent in the 70s, a wild redheaded woman who was very protective of her children, was obsessed with. She loved this story. She didn't really study the history in the same way that we do now. I have, but she took me to see the statue in London, and it was something that was very important to her. It became very important to me in its own way, embedded in my consciousness. You wonder if what came first, your mother telling you the story, or the subsequent research that made me even more passionate about the subject matter. And I felt there was a way to tell the story. I just never really knew how it was going to happen. And I'd written the script, and it was there. It was on a shelf, and it was through working in Georgia with Olga that I realized that I'd found Boudica. There was a way to do this. She didn't know it at the time. I'm not sure she believed it was something she could do when I first talked to her about it, but she seized it and took it. And I knew she would, because of the way that she takes every challenge sent to her. She's the most incredible actress who is almost fearless. Oh, she has fear. I'm sure she has plenty of fear, but she doesn't let you know that. And so I knew I found my Boudica when I worked with her. The script, I pulled it out, and I went to her, and I flew to Paris and begged her to be in it, and showed her the sketches and the drawings that I'd done of the before and the after, and that sort of thing, to prove that I wasn't going to mess it up too badly. So luckily, she had faith in me.
Well, Olga, it seems like he threw the ball to you. What actually drew you to this project? I know you've done action films before, but what about Boudica, and what research you've done for it?
Well, Boudica is the most, probably the most affected and broken character I've played. The most raw, the most savage character I've played. I think the closest savage character I played was probably in Centurion, but she's not as her backstory in that movie wasn't developed, and it was like a supporting role, and we didn't know anything about her, what happened to her, whether she suffered or not. But Boudica, obviously in this film, and also in as we know from history, she has suffered a great deal, and she didn't only lose everything she had and all the people she loved, which by them I mean her husband and her two daughters, but she was also, according to the stories, forced to watch the raping of her daughters and their killing. And when a parent, a parent and a mother is witnessing such brutality, I think I just don't understand how a human being can live after that. A mother witnessing the killings of her children, there is no more life after that. You're broken. You are something moves inside you to the point of no return. There is no healing. It's not something that you can heal after. it's forever. It's the death, it's internal death in self, even if your heart is still breathing. This is, I think she died when her children died. That's when she died. But her body kept living, and she goes, it's just all that other part, she's in a trance. She's not living anymore. That is just somehow some sort of a trance where she is suicidal and vengeful, and she goes for the revenge, and she is not afraid to die, and because she has nothing else to lose. It's the character who is at the folie, you know, at the craziness. She's mad. She's a mad woman who leads a very successful opposition, a very successful fight for freedom, incredibly, because apparently, according to the story, she was one fight away from winning, one battle away from winning. She won so many battles, and being a woman who actually managed to lead all these people and people that wanted to follow her. You know, it's not easy to follow anybody, whether it's a woman or a man. You need to have certain substance or something to convince people to follow you. And I think people saw this rage in her. She was so she had no tactic. There was no tactic like Romans. There is no war tactic or to her attacks. They were just, this is why also apparently they were unpredictable, right? They were just, the Romans couldn't predict their moves because they were completely wild. And she led their people with an instinct, like an animal. There's something very animalistic in her. There is no, you know, school of war. She didn't go through that. She's just an animal that is raw and beaten up and abused, and the animal that turns to aggress in return.
So true, so true. So much, so complex, and so much rage in Boudica. Jesse, I love your previous films, and a lot of films I watch has a lot of gunplay. So this must be an entirely refreshing turn. Could you talk about the prepping, you know, everyone to do swordplay rather than gunplay and, you know, crazy acrobatic tricks?
It represents a slightly different modus operandi. But for me, it was just the role. The character of Boudica obsessed me, and I wanted to focus on that. And with all those other films, I'm focused on those characters as well. It's you know, it just happens that they make their dramatic decisions, you know, with a firearm, you know, in their hand. They're still well-rounded characters I've worked very, very hard on. It's not any obsession particularly with weapons or firearms or swords. It's more to do with the characters that I choose to make films about and how their particular choices lead them into violent scenarios where often they have to pick up something, you know, pick up a weapon, you know. And so that for me, it wasn't vastly different, except that, as Olga has mentioned already, there was a lack of training to Boudica. It was all instinct. It was all gut fury, intestinal fortitude. There was no, you know, she just, you know, it was a fury that came from somewhere deep within her soul, that allowed her to do what she did. She had some training. We see her training a bit with the sword, but the sword itself is sort of, we're not sure if it's embodied by magic or if people are imagining it, and it's the story that was told that we're watching. But it's all blended together in you know, in a fury that was quite difficult to choreograph and be original with. And we weren't quite sure what the look of the battle sequences were going to be like, and we rehearsed and we shot freebie videos, which are free visualization tapes. And even then, I was sitting with the stunt coordinator and the second unit director. So I'm not sure what we're going for here. But Olga's interesting. The moment you call action, this furious demon came out of her, and I'm not sure where she went. And I don't think it's a good thing for a director necessarily to ask, because it means the actor and has to articulate it, and that can sometimes take some of the fury away, that can dissipate it, and that's their special. So whatever it was, wherever she went, whatever she tapped into, my God, it was furious. And when I saw it in the dailies as to what we were shooting as opposed to what we were rehearsing, we couldn't find a stunt woman to keep up to mimic that. It was so visceral and powerful. It was really something rather wonderful to watch. And I know it probably took an awful toll on Olga, because she's one of the sweetest, nicest, most caring people. But to become this furious warrior, and she did it so well. It was wonderful. It was quite a sight to behold.
Wow.
So she has more to do with the creation of that action in many ways than I do. I had to work out how to come up with 55 gallons of blood that we ended up using.
Well, that is impressive, Olga. So what was more challenging for you, these fight sequences, or sitting in the makeup chair and putting the costume on for a very long time in this movie?
No, of course, the actual action is much more challenging. I mean, you have to go not only it's physical work when in the second part of the film, when she's mostly in battles and constantly ripping people apart and killing Romans, but it's also an emotional, obviously an emotional constant state of anger, grief, hatred towards these oppressors, and it's, you have to constantly keep it in you. And I have to mention and remind that in movies you have to do takes, so it's not non-stop. You have to do one scene over and over and over again, so you actually live that thing many times per day. And of course, by the end of it, it's when you give so much, you're exhausted. And I think and the emotional exhaustion is almost more tiring than the physical one. But yeah, both combined together, it just wipes you out. I was sleeping very well. Let's say.
Well, at least you don't have to endure this any longer. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question. Because the true story of Boudica, no one really knows what actually happened to her. But in this film, it was sort of like a hero's glory. How satisfying is the ending to Boudica, Queen of War, to both of you in this sense?
Shall I go first, Olga?
Yeah,
to me, it's absolutely satisfying when we put this poor woman through this trial that we put her through in this film, and she realizes, she knows what's happened, because it doesn't hit straight away. It takes her, along with the audience, a good 15-20 minutes after it's happened for her to realize what has actually happened to her daughters. And she's learned this, she's learned everything else, she's knows that she's lost everything. She's sort of lost interest in this, vengeance campaign anyway. By this point, she's made the mark, she's made her point, she's wrecked the leadership of Nero. He's lost all, they've lost all faith in him in Rome because of the amount he's been losing in this campaign. So she has done what she set out to do, and life after that, without her children, without her husband, is unimaginable. And there was not a happy ending that would see her live on, in my opinion. A woman like that, a mother, and she was the most caring of mothers, and she was the most caring of wives. There wouldn't be a fair scenario for me that would see that continue. And so, you see the daughters come and they say, it's time, it's okay to leave now, you're okay, you've done what you needed to do, you've won, you've completed the task, now it's time to be with us, and for me, that's the most satisfying. And then to know that not only was it not wasted, her defeat there in the final battle, it wasn't a waste in any way, shape, or form. It's a statue that 2,000 years later is still in the middle of London, in the very center of our government, you know, next to the Houses of Parliament, beside Big Ben, by Scotland Yard. It's right there. It's in the middle. So you cannot go to the center of the hub of how England is, you know, it's our national anthem. It's on the coin. So, and I wanted to end the film with that, to let people know this was a worthy way to pass. Anyway, that's my thought on it. So I'm very satisfied with the way it happened.
Well, Olga, last words on how satisfying this ending was to you?
Yeah, I obviously Jesse said a lot, so I can just say that I totally agree with what he said. And to me, it's very satisfying because, as I'll repeat myself, as I said in the beginning, she dies. She dies inside when her daughters dies, when her family dies. From that moment on, she's going for the death. She's basically, her journey is to join them, but on her way, she's gonna wipe some of the enemies with her. She's taking them with her. She knows she's going, but she's gonna take a couple of people with her. She's not going by herself. It's the revenge. It's the revenge. It is a suicide, but it's a suicide with you know, with giving as much grief to the
Enemy.
to people that caused this. Yes.
I couldn't get this film financed in the US because they kept saying it's, you know, but she loses. It's like, you don't get it. You don't understand the story. This is the most noble of you know, of endings. This is beyond, you know, she gives everything, you know, for her children, everything, and that's not a loss. But anyway, luckily,
no, I agree with you. It's not a loss, and also she doesn't want to live. This is what you know, people have to understand. And also, you know, obviously, you know, I'm gonna say, well, I'm not her, but I cannot imagine any woman wanting to live beyond their children dying. It's just nobody wants to live. You don't want to live. What's the point? She doesn't anyway. It's not for her. Yes.
Yeah. There's a very old saying that says the most noble thing in the world is to find a cause worth dying for that you believe in, and that's what she found. You know.
Exactly.
Well said. Well said. Well, Jesse, Olga, thank you very much for carrying this conversation. This is a very powerful, emotional, and action-oriented film. So thank you very much for speaking to us about Boudica, Queen of War. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.